One of the biggest issues facing humanity today is growing levels of poverty and hunger.
We are a long way from achieving the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals of no poverty and zero hunger by 2030.
In fact, the world has been moving backwards on this in recent years, with the largest increase in global poverty since the 1990s. Over 712 million people were living in extreme poverty in 2022, which is 23 million more than in 2019.
And the number of people facing extreme hunger has also risen, with 733 million in 2023.
At the G20 Summit in Rio de Janeiro in November, Brazil's President Lula da Silva put the issue of tackling poverty and hunger at the top of the international agenda. We're launching a global alliance against hunger and poverty.
We should be clear that humanity has the resources to make poverty and hunger history on a global scale once and for all.
Not only does humanity have the resources to end poverty and hunger, we also have a recent and outstanding example to learn exactly how we can do that. And that is China's success in eradicating extreme poverty, which was achieved in 2021.
In just 40 years, China lifted more than 800 million people out of poverty.
How do they do it? We went to Hunan province to find out.
Hi, I'm Ileana Chan.
And I'm Fiona Edwards, and you're watching our new series, Global South Rising, where we cover new developments in the Global South's struggle for independence, sovereignty, and social progress.
In 2023, global military spending reached a record high of $2.44 trillion, with the United States responsible for 37% of this. That's a reported $916 billion in 2023.
But what's important to know, however, is that US military spending is actually twice the officially acknowledged level. An investigation by Monthly Review has shown that US military spending was a staggering $1.5 trillion in 2022 alone.
Economist Jeffrey Sachs has calculated that it would cost only $175 billion per year over 20 years to end extreme poverty worldwide. This represents less than 1% of the combined income of the richest countries in the world, and a fraction of what the world is currently spending on the military.
And in another report from July 2024 from the United Nations University World Institute for Development Economics Research, estimated that ending extreme poverty by 2030 would cost about 70 to 325 billion per year.
That's only 0.6% of the gross national income of the OECD's high-income countries.
In a world that produces enough food to feed everyone, and with a staggering 1 billion tons of food wasted every year, the fact that 733 million people are suffering from hunger is clearly, in the words of Lula da Silva at his G20 speech, a political choice.
Imagine what massive advances in human rights could be achieved if resources were redirected towards a global poverty alleviation campaign instead of promoting global conflict and death.
And this is exactly what China did. They directed the country's resources to achieving the goal of eradicating absolute poverty, and they did it in the span of just over 40 years.
To understand the scale of their achievement, let's reflect for a moment on where China has risen from.
China's revolution in 1949, which was led by the Communist Party of China, ended China's century of humiliation, which started with China's defeat by the British Empire in the First Opium War of 1839.
This marked the beginning of more than 100 years of foreign intervention, colonialism, war, and civil war, in which around 100 million Chinese people were killed.
China emerged from this in 1949 as one of the poorest countries in the entire world, with a life expectancy of only 35 years. By 1981, that had risen to 68 years. And now, today, in 2024, life expectancy has risen to over 77 years. This is a staggering advance in human rights in just the past 75 years.
In 1978, while China was still one of the poorest countries in the world, it entered into a new era of reform and opening. The economic reforms enacted during this time unleashed the historically unprecedented and rapid economic development of China.
So just to put that into some figures, between 1979 and 2018, China's annual GDP growth averaged 9.5%. That meant that on average, China's economy doubled in size every 8 years. The central feature of China's economic policy in this period has been massive levels of state investment geared towards industrializing the economy, which has made China the manufacturing powerhouse of the world.
Today, China leads the world on many fronts, including infrastructure and connectivity, research and development, as well as green technology. We went to see the results of this on our recent visit to Hunan province.
Our first stop was Changsha, which is the capital of Hunan province, with a population of 10.4 million people. And Changsha has recently become one of China's new first-tier cities.
It's a major transportation hub with China's high-speed train network connecting Changsha with other major centers across the country, including Beijing, Shanghai, Xi'an, Wuhan, and Chengdu.
So just to put this into some context, this means you can travel from Changsha to Shanghai, which is a distance of 673 miles in just over 4 hours.
In Britain, the train journey from London to Edinburgh also takes us over 4 hours, but the distance traveled is about half at 332 miles.
So can you imagine the difference that a high-speed rail network would make to public transport in Britain? Unfortunately, we've experienced in Britain the HS2 project, which has been beset by delays. The project started in 2017, but it's not going to be opened until at least 2029 or 2033 even.
Meanwhile, China's high-speed rail started in 2008, and by the end of 2013, just 5 years, China had built a high-speed rail network route of over 10,000 kilometers, far exceeding that in any other country and larger than the network in the entire European Union, according to the World Bank. So we are a little behind. But back to what we experienced in Changsha.
Changsha is a really vibrant place. And surprisingly, we found out that Changsha is something of an LGBT hotspot in China, second apparently to Chengdu. There's loads of LGBT bars, clubs, and Changsha is really well known for being a young and innovative city. One of the defining characteristics of Changsha is that it's managed to become one of China's most developed and vibrant cities without sacrificing its immense wealth of history and culture.
It's an ancient city with a history that dates back over 3,000 years, yet also has great significance in relation to China's 20th century history of war, civil war, and revolution.
One of the places that illustrated this dynamic was Lu Academy, which was founded in 976 AD. It's one of China's famed four ancient academies, and it's currently the oldest higher education institution run at a permanent location in China. Today, it's known as Hunan University.
This was where Mao Zedong studied independently and lived on campus between 1917 and 1919.
The Academy's distinctive educational philosophy of seeking truth from facts really flourished during this time. In these years, Mao engaged in many activities during his time, such as co-founding the New Citizen Society, organising the Work Study in France programme, and initiating a journal called Shangyong, which is one of China's earliest communist publications.
There's a great sense of pride in Changsha about its revolutionary history. The way history and cultural heritage has been integrated into a modern dynamic way of life is something that is seen as a model for China's continuing development. One good example of this is the Orange Isle.
It is one of Hunan province's most popular tourist and leisure destinations, boasting up to 180,000 visitors per day in its peak season. It is also the home of the Young Mao statue. We also got the opportunity to see an interactive theatre play there about Mao during his university days. And this was very moving and significant because it showed how important the student movement was to the revolutionary struggle at that time.
Another really good example of this integration of modern, vibrant Chinese society into significant cultural heritage sites is the Fengqian ancient well community, named after the preserved example of the Qing dynasty drainage systems marking its entrance. This is a community that includes Baiguayuan, a historic district lined with ancient cobblestone streets and preserved residences dating back to the Qing dynasty, and today is a hub of nightlife, street food, interesting tea houses, and local boutiques. It also includes the Chengqian residence, a venue where early secret communist meetings were held. This was also where Mao's journal Shangjiang Review was printed. So you get a small sense of the length of Chinese civilization and also China's immense transformation over the last 100 years.
Changsha's development is a great example of the continuing progress in the metropolitan areas that were the focus of the initial stages of China's rise as an economic powerhouse. However, by 2012, almost 100 million people were still living in poverty, mainly in the vast rural areas of China. So the final phase of China's fight against poverty required a shift in strategy from the cities to the predominantly isolated and underdeveloped areas of rural China.
China has its own clear, measurable definition of what it means to bring someone out of poverty.
So let's look at that. There's two aspects of it. The first is a person's income needs to be raised above the threshold of $2.30 per day. And the second relates to a person's living conditions, which need to meet what China coins as the two assurances and the three guarantees. So, what is the two assurances? The two assurances of food and clothing, and the three guarantees of basic medical services, safe housing with drinking water and electricity, and free and compulsory education for a minimum of 9 years.
Using these metrics, Hunan province went from 6.8 million people living below the poverty line in 2014 to zero by 2021.
Hunan province is a useful case to study because it was here in November 2013 that China's President Xi Jinping visited Xibandong village to launch the final chapter of the poverty alleviation campaign that centered what they called rural revitalization. The goal was the development of specific and realistic plans to lift each village out of poverty in a way that was lasting and sustainable. We witnessed how China's approach was pragmatic, adaptive, and people-centered. The mobilization of resources into this fight against poverty was enormous. This cannot be understated. In Hunan province, 21,000 poverty alleviation work teams made up of more than 600,000 people were dispatched to the rural areas of the province. The teams researched the areas, consulted with local people, and came up with appropriate solutions to tackle poverty in each locality, taking into account the local conditions, resources, unique opportunities, and the culture of the regions.
In less than 10 years, a village with a population of around 900 people of Miao ethnicity, Xibadong village, went from an isolated poor community to a thriving one, with modern housing, electricity, running water, and digital and physical connectivity. The villagers played a vital and proactive role, which became a blueprint for how rural revitalization would be rolled out across the country. They held village elections to nominate a project leader that worked closely with the team of experts sent from the central government. After a period of research and consultation, they came up with a plan for development that included 4 industries: agriculture, with an emphasis on kiwi fruit, the production of mineral water, Miao embroidery handicrafts, and tourism.
We also got the opportunity to visit Qingxi village, home to around 9,500 people. And this village also has its own unique poverty alleviation strategy. It is the birthplace of the great Chinese writer Zhou Libo, who wrote the classic 1961 novel Great Changes in a Mountain Village. This novel depicted a village going through a rural revitalization, and it's become a touchstone for China's public mobilization.
Qingxi used this cultural legacy to create a literary hotspot in 3 main ways. Firstly, the former residence of Zhou Libo was renovated and became the main draw for the village as a tourist destination. Secondly, the publishing houses responsible for publishing some of the most popular books in China were established in the area. We were shown a catalog that included many books that have since become TV and movie adaptations. Thirdly, the China Literature Museum was built. It holds signed copies of all significant literary texts published since 1949. These 3 main draws also allowed smaller individual bookstores and themed businesses such as restaurants and guest houses to thrive.
In 2023, the village received 1.2 million tourists, generating an RMB of over 12 million. So just to put that in context, that's equivalent to 1.3 million pounds. And it represented a 40% year-on-year increase. So by all accounts, this has been a hugely successful project.
We also visited a nearby village that developed manufacturing dark black tea as one of their core industries. Hunan is one of the few places in the world that has a specific rock that provides the mineral conditions that allow for this rare tea variation. Along with funding from the central government and provincial government, the villagers chose to add their individual land and savings into a communal pool in order to bring this project to fruition. We sat down in the newly built village library with the village's Communist Party branch secretary to get a better insight into how this was achieved. Maybe surprisingly, he explained that one of the most difficult challenges to overcome was a shift in mindset for the villagers, from individual concerns to a communal way of thinking.
This shift was instrumental to its success, and the results are tangible. It has led to more opportunities and jobs for the local villagers, allowing the younger generation to come back instead of moving away to the cities. It also means that since the focus is no longer just on survival, the quality of living and the quality of the environment has become more important, which has allowed, for example, for more trees to be planted.
It was this formidable combination of overall vision and locally tailored initiatives that has made China's scale of economic development possible.
Crucially, it was significant levels of state investment that has transformed China's countryside. Firstly, this investment was used to build infrastructure and connectivity. This, of course, includes the vast network of high-speed train lines, as well as new roads that span the country, allowing accessibility to previously very isolated areas. Electricity and the internet have also brought remote villages into the 21st century. Secondly, investment in the creation of new industries and value-added production has been key to creating the conditions for prosperity in the countryside. And finally, of course, in providing essential local services for the people, from education to housing.
So let's put some numbers on that. In Hunan, the provincial government massively increased its financial investment in poverty alleviation from 18 billion RMB in 2015 to 628 billion RMB by 2018. That's a 34-fold increase in investment.
Alongside this, the resources and expertise of the national government, state-owned companies, nearby cities, and the local people themselves all played a crucial role in creating the economic development that has been key to eradicating absolute poverty in Hunan province and beyond. In other words, it required a mobilization of the whole of Chinese society to make poverty history, and that's exactly what they did.
So what can we learn from this? Can the world learn from China's example? I think while we definitely can't underestimate the incredible effort this took on all levels, from basic logistics, financial incentives and investments, old-fashioned elbow grease, to the emotional and psychological collective work that needed to be done here, in the end, it's political will or choice, as Lula put it. It may be an oversimplification, but that's where it all starts, right?
Absolutely. And I think China's rise and its huge success in eliminating absolute poverty carries enormous lessons for the world. What was really striking was the importance placed upon state investment, industrialization, and value-added production. Throughout the Chinese countryside, industries have been created that process raw materials into higher value goods. And this is instead of simply extracting raw materials for export. And this model is bringing fast economic growth and development to rural China. And it's a development model that contrasts with the model that the US has sought to impose on countries in the global south, in which raw materials, whether that's oil or lithium, are extracted and exported to international markets without any value-added production, which has had the impact of stunting economic development in the global south. And China has proven itself also to be an important partner for other countries in the global south in their own development path. For example, the Belt and Road Initiative has brought hundreds of billions of investment to countries all over the world.
Unfortunately, the US's new Cold War offensive against China includes a massive smear campaign, which is suppressing public discussion about how China eradicated extreme poverty. But the real priorities for humanity are the global fights against poverty, hunger, and climate change, not the push which is coming from Washington for global war. Lessons from China show that with the right political priorities, poverty could be made history worldwide.
You've been watching Global South Rising on Empire Watch, our new series. Thank you for joining us, and see you next time.